Hello, everyone, and welcome. This evening's presentation is being sponsored by the Arc of Quad Cities and American Bank and Trust in Davenport, Iowa. My name is Mary Heil, and I'll be the coordinator for this evening. Tonight, Mary Ann will be talking about bringing you Protected Tomorrow's Planning for the Future workshop. Our presenter this evening will be Mary Ann Ellert, president and founder of Protected Tomorrows. Before we begin, there's a few housekeeping items. We ask that everyone keep your video and microphone off for the duration of the presentation. We will be locking access to this presentation, and you will not be able to reconnect if you're disconnected. However, this class is being recorded, and you will be able to view it once it's placed on the Arc of Quad Cities website. I'd also like to bring your attention to the bottom of your Zoom window. If you have questions during the class, click on the chat balloon and enter your questions in the dialog box located in the lower right corner of the screen and press enter. We'll answer as many as possible at the end of the presentation. And now I'd like to introduce Mary Ann Ellert.
Good evening, everyone. Glad to see you again after the last couple sessions. So we've done one on guardianship versus POAs, and we did another class on the ABLE Act, which was very fun. We did it with JJ Hanley from Illinois ABLE. So tonight we're going to be talking about planning for the future. But to get started, I wanted to introduce you to someone from American Bank and Trust, who is a sponsor of tonight's event. Mr. Richard Emery, who is the Senior Vice President of the bank, as well as the Senior Trust Officer. So he's going to give us a little more information about the bank and himself. So Richard?
Thank you very much, Mary Ann. Hi, again, I'm Richard Emery with American Bank and Trust. We are located here in the Quad Cities. We have trust offices on both the Illinois side in Rock Island, Illinois, and on the Iowa side in Davenport, Iowa. American Bank is very pleased and honored to be a corporate sponsor of this evening's event. We're looking forward to being a part of that. Just to tell you a little bit about our bank, our trust department does have a lot of specialization in the administration of special needs trusts for individuals of all ages. We offer a full range of investment and administration services. We have several accounts here in the Quad Cities, but we also serve clients throughout the country for those types of account needs. So if you ever have a need for that, please contact the ARC of the Quad Cities, and they will put you in contact with us, and we would be happy to talk with you. Again, you don't have to be here in the Quad Cities for us to be able to assist you. So again, thank you for allowing American Bank to be a part of this, and we look forward to the program.
Okay, thank you. And just for those who are interested in contacting Mr. Emery at the end of the workshop, we will attach some information with the recording with his information as well. Okay. All right. So we have a lot to cover in the next hour. So we're going to get started. We had classes on guardianship. So when we get to that point, I'm just going to briefly talk about it. We had a great class on the Illinois ABLE. And so I'm going to briefly talk about that, but I'm going to talk about all the other things that families have to do. So let us get started here. So those of you who don't know me yet, the reason I do this is because of my sister. When I was 4 years old, my sister was born. She's a twin, and her name was Marcia. She was born with cerebral palsy, and she had a great life. As an adult, she was about age 8, but I learned, I went to school, I worked in the financial industry, I worked running banks. I did all that. And then about 30 years ago, because of my sister, I started a firm that was going to help families plan for the future. And it's because of her, because I watched my parents, as they got older, worry about who was going to step up. And now there were 5 other children in the family. I had 2 older brothers and 1 other sister, plus these 2 girls, the twins. And at my age of 6, my sister's age of 2, my parents had pulled me aside because that was the day they got the diagnosis of cerebral palsy. And they pulled me aside and said, Marcia's going to be different. You're the oldest girl. And so when you get older, you're going to take care of Marcia. I was 6. But I was one of those kids who loved responsibility. So I loved it. I loved that I get to take care of her and help, so I was always connected to the hip. At Special Olympics and any program she was in, took her to Las Vegas with me. This picture in the middle was at my parents' 50th wedding anniversary, and she and I were like in charge. It was really fun. But as she got older, she was still at home with my parents at the age of 34. My parents were sure they were going to keep her at home. I kept challenging them with that. And I convinced them at some point after talking to her. So she was verbal, and you always knew what she thought, sometimes to the detriment of all of us, because she was very direct. But I asked her what she wanted, and she told me that she wanted to move out like the rest of us did, except that what would mom and dad do without her? And I tell that story because sometimes we can be very protective over our children, and they want independence, but they're afraid of taking independence because they know that we need them, right? So my sister did go live residentially for 9 years. She did great. She did things my parents might have never seen her do. And then at the age of 39, she had a seizure in her sleep. She couldn't turn over and she suffocated. So it took me a long time. It's sometimes even hard to tell that story, but I tell it because I learned so much. Many of my mentors said, you always talked about what she was teaching you, use it. So that's how we created this parent university and all the training that we do, because I've listened to my parents over the years. Since then, I have 3 boys, 3 stepsons, 1 with a disability. So I stepped right back into it, being a caregiver. And since then, after that, my parents needed care. So I was their caregiver for 10 years. So I've been a caregiver in many roles. And I've worked with thousands and thousands of families over the last 30 years, learning, listening, trying to find solutions. That's what we do, trying to help them find jobs, find trust companies, find pieces that fit into the solution. And, that's our mission. So we're really glad to be here tonight and use some of the things that I learned from my sister. Okay. One of the things I did learn is that life for us is more complicated, perhaps the typical family, right? We're thinking about school, and then we're thinking about IEPs, and we're thinking about doctors. And then add to that somebody like us who comes to you and says, you need to be thinking about SSI and Medicaid, and you need to be thinking about trusts, and you need to be thinking about special needs trusts. And what is that, right? And sometimes I'm surprised that people ask me the same questions they asked me 30 years ago. But then I think, well, why am I surprised? It's a new family who never heard about this stuff. And so it's complex. So the other thing I know is that it's impossible. And we're going to show you a lot of things that need to be done for the planning for the future, but it's impossible to know everything. And it's impossible to try to do it all at once. So we kind of put this in 8 steps. Some people do number 3 first. Some people have to do number 8 first. They're different steps, right? But we're going to talk about some of these steps and how we approach them. So our mission, and Protected Tomorrows is your mission. We want to help you keep your family members safe and fulfilled. That's all we want to do, is make sure they're happy and that they have a full life. Now, I'm going to go back to that number 1 for a minute, because I call it take a candid look. And it's the start. It's where we always start. And so I ask parents, if you really want to plan for the future, I'm going to ask you 2 questions. What's the best thing that can happen for your family member? What is it? And then the second question is, what's your biggest fear for their future? So since I'm not face-to-face with you tonight, usually I'll go around the room and we take some time letting people write this down. And then we would go through and play a family feud game and I'll see who gets the number 1 answer. But I will tell you that the majority of people will answer 2 things to that take a candid look. I want my child to be happy, and I want them to be independent. And I will say what that means for each of the people who say that to me is different. So some people relate it to a residential safety, some relate to enough money, some might relate to the complexity of government benefits and wishing it was simpler. Most want their child to have, if they can, a job. They want them to have a safe place to live. They want them to have friends, and they want them to be happy. But happy for somebody who has a significant disability versus someone who's more high functioning is different, right? So I challenge you to take that task seriously, to write down, what is it that makes your child happy and independent for your child? And then answer that second question too. What are you worried about? What's the biggest thing that keeps you up at night about the future? And I will tell you that the number 1 answer when we play this game is abuse. The people are afraid that people will take advantage of their child. Now, It depends again of capabilities. If the child can stand up for themselves or is susceptible to someone financially taking advantage of them or emotionally or whatever it may be. But whatever yours are, those two things you come back with are, I call those my benchmarks. I learned really on in business that setting what I want, right? Setting, if I'm starting a business, I got to know what the business is going to do and what's going to make it successful. And I have to know where I'm going to fail. And so I take that same approach with this process to say, if you know what it looks like, if you know what success for this child looks like, no matter what it is, and you know what the dangers are, then we can take this plan and put it around those things so that as time goes on, you can look back and say, wow, we made progress every year. We made progress and we're going in the right direction. So we're going to talk about several of these things in the planning. All right. So I'm going to take it from a couple of perspectives because the planning, there's some things you have to do. So I didn't used to always talk so much about this you as much as just your child. But over time, I've learned if you are not okay, your child's not okay, right? There's so much you have to take care of about you. And when you're going to go see an attorney and we're going to do these things, we have to know what's important for you. So I'm just going to talk about a few things that you should be thinking about in order to get ready for opportunities that will present for your child. So the first thing is you need to do retirement planning for yourself. If you're 20 or 40 or 60, you need to plan for your own future. You need to think about a couple of things. You need to know what you live on. You need to know, and I'll explain to you why this is so important. You need to understand, so this is a person's budget or your cash flow. And the left-hand column is what you as a family live on. So what's coming in, what's going out, what do you spend on housing, what do you spend on insurance, what do you spend on fun, what do you spend on food, all the details, right? It's a lot of work. But our budgets have something special in them, right? So if we go to the second column, we will, into the second section, you will see that's something that says PWD Future Care. It's a line item, about the sixth one down in the second series. PWD means person with a disability. And we have a line item there for our child's care. So when I ask you to do your cash flow, I want you to do your expenses. And then we're going to do a separate cash flow for your child and we're going to plug it in. Why is that? Because we want to understand if you really want to plan for your child's future, first you have to plan for yours. And then you have to say, okay, this is what we are spending as a family today. Then we have to say, we're going to retire. We want to retire, right, as parents. And so if we're going to retire, I call it retiring for three. We are always going to have to fund ourselves, if it's a couple, or if you're single, one person, and this other person, or some people, some clients I have 2 children with disabilities. I have one client who has 5 children with disabilities. She's single, okay? So she has to plan for retirement for 6, not just 1. So when you do the current column, it's how will you spend money now? And then we go to the right-hand column and say, what is retirement going to look like? And what's it going to look like? So is our mortgage going to be paid off? Are you still going to have a mortgage? What is it? And we think in today's dollars, don't think in future dollars. So this is an exercise that I'd like you to do so that we can start thinking about what does your child's future look like, all right? And when we give you this recording, we will attach to it these worksheets that you can use for your exercises, right? So you build a cash flow, what's coming in, what's going out, what do you spend today? And then the right-hand column, what do you want retirement to look like? And typically what we see is in the today column, you're putting away into 401ks and IRAs, you're saving money. In retirement, you're not saving anymore, you're spending. And so the left-hand column will have things you're putting into Medicare and Social Security. The right-hand column, you're getting Social Security and you're not putting into it anymore. So there's changes between each column. The retirement column also should have more money in it for things like going out, vacations, fun, right? Okay, so that's homework number 2. Number 1 is know how you're spending your money and know what retirement might look like. Because if you're not okay again, your child's not okay. All right. The second step, and this is going to be necessary when you start meeting with an attorney, okay? And it's necessary for you to think about your own financial plan. And sometimes people have a hard time putting everything on paper, but it's a good way to measure yourself every year. So come up with, what do you have? What's your home worth? How much you have in your bank accounts? How much do you have in cars? How much do you have in your investments in your retirement accounts, right? So on the left-hand side is everything you own. And on the right-hand side is your mortgage. If you have a home equity line, if you have loans, if you have credit card debt, the things go on the right side. So we take what you own, subtract what you owe, and that's your net worth. Okay. And then we're going to, in the bottom right corner, we're also going to put a few key things that the attorneys like to know when you go see an attorney, or if you see a financial person who's helping you with some of the planning. They want to know, do you have life insurance? What kind of life insurance? Do you have long-term care insurance? What kind of long-term care insurance? And we're going to talk about why those are so important pieces, right? If you're planning for your child and you don't have any life insurance and you pass away and you spent all your money, what's going to go for your child's future? Because we're talking about 3 stages of life. Now, your retirement, and when you pass away, you got one more retirement fund, and that's your child's. So the future, we have to think about how we do that, right? We want to know long-term care. Why? Because we could be really good. Our financial plan could say, wow, we're really okay. We got pensions, we got money saved. It's going to take care of us for the rest of our life. And it's going to take care of our child for the rest of their life. But what if we get sick, or what if we die? So we like to look at what's the best thing that can happen for you and what could screw it up. One of you could die, 2 of you could die. One of you could get sick, you both get sick. Those impact what you're going to be able to leave for your child. So it's important to get this data down so that when you go into the next stages, you at least know where you're at. Okay. All right. The third thing I want you to know is your Social Security statement. And this is really important because we're going to be talking about this in the next piece. This is somebody's Social Security statement, and everybody's looks different. Okay, I'm going to show you another one in a little bit. This retirement statement you get from Social Security, you go on to socialsecurity.gov and you can request the report sent to you, or you can have them show you the numbers right away. And this is really important. So this person says at age 67, they're eligible for $2,845 a month at retirement. But if they wait till they're 70 to take their Social Security, you look at $3,500 a month. But if they take it early at 62, they'll get $2,000 a month. Okay, this is somebody who's worked a long time. They put money into the system. Now there's some other numbers here that I want you to pay attention to, and most people don't even realize this exists. So let's go to the survivor section. There's a number here that says you've earned enough credits to receive benefits for your family. Your child could get $2,100 a month, and your family, I'm going to go look at 2 numbers specifically. The top number of $2,145 a month, and the family benefits cannot be more than $5,004. What does that mean? So that comes into a program that your child will become eligible for as long as they had the disability before the age of 22. And these are benefits they can get on mom and dad's record. So if this was dad's record, that where it says your child, that doesn't mean only a child who's under the age of 18. That means a child who has a disability and is an adult. And that number, the $2,145, is the max that they can pay that child, and it's equal to 2/3 of the parent's age 67 benefit. Now, when the parent retires or dies or becomes disabled, the child becomes eligible for this number. And I'm going to show you how it all plays out. Now, in this case, there's this maximum $5,004. Well, what is that? Well, if dad takes his full amount at age 67 of $2,845, and he has a wife, and the wife never worked, the wife's eligible for half of that. And the child's eligible for half of that when the parent's 67, and they're eligible for 2/3 of the $2,845 when the parent dies. So if they're going to have to pay dad and mom and the child's amount is limited because the family whole pot on this pot cannot pay more than $5,004. If mom's not getting it, dad's going to get the max. Okay, so I want you to know how to read these numbers, and I'm going to show you how to apply them for your future. Okay. The other thing about you that I want you to have when you're planning is know how your pension works. Pension, well, how does that have to do with my child? So many pensions in this country, let's say I've worked for the state police. The state police pension in Illinois works this way. The teacher's pension works this way. The state university system works this way. And many pension plans, government pensions, military pensions, federal retirement pension works this way. If you have a pension, of one of those pensions that does this, it says, I'll get 100% if it was mine, but if I die, my spouse can get half. But it also says, what do we both die? The child with the disability also can get half. So if I'm getting a pension of $4,000 and my spouse can get $2,000, when my spouse dies, that $2,000 goes to my child. But we have to make sure that that $2,000 pension goes to our child, doesn't go to them, but it goes to a special trust we're going to talk about, right? Because if the child gets the $2,000, they will not get not be eligible for their government benefits. So what's the to-do for you? It's to find out what kind of pension you might get, and will it pay beyond mom and dad? Okay, those are all really important components of things you need to know if you're going to plan properly. Okay, so that's all about you, the things you need to be doing in order to do the planning for your child. Okay, those are really important things. So let's talk about your child. Oh, we're thinking about the future. So this is really hard, right? So somebody says to me, okay, my child's 2, my child's 22, my 4 is 42. I get the same thing. It doesn't matter if the child's 2 or 42. It is very, very difficult to imagine our child without us. I heard this from my mother. I think about it when I think about my son. There's things that we do for them that we don't expect someone else to do, but someone else probably has to do them. So it is very hard to think about their future without us. But as mature adults and as parents, we have this job. And when I ask someone young who's coming into my office, let's say they're 22, and they say, we want to do retirement planning. What do they know about their retirement at the age of 22? Zero, right? But I'm asking them questions anyway. And I'm asking them questions about, how do you spend your money? I want to know their mindset. Do you go to shows a lot? Do you save a lot? I want to get a sense of what they do, because that's going to tell me a little bit about them. And then I ask them, well, you're here for retirement. What do you think? They're 20 years old. Well, they're going to say, we want to retire at 50. And we want to be able to, they're going to describe it to me. They have a vision. If they can have a vision at 20, but yet sometimes I ask people when they're 65 and they say, what do you think retirement's going to look like? They're, oh, we have no idea yet. So people are different. But this is different. We must think this way. We must think about what's the vision for our child. Now, we don't have to do it when they're 2, we're thinking about who's the doctor. And we're thinking about what kind of school they're going to get into, what kind of therapy do they need. As they get older, they get into the school system, they need to get into the federal government says to the states that you have to require parents to do transition planning from out of school. So they're pretty protected. The bus shows up after this pandemic, the bus shows up and takes our child to a special education program, right? And they get services. And when the school's done, then all of a sudden there's no bus. And so it's us, it's incumbent upon us to find the programs that are important to them. So we start to think about when they're 14, the schools must do this. Schools don't have funding for it. So sometimes, parents are on their own to really think this through. So what they have to think about is, where do I see my child living? What kind of doctors are they going to need? Where's their fund going to come from? Where's their future education going to come from? And can they work? All those things. And then when we think about that and we plan their life, just like we would plan your life, like you would plan your retirement and say, well, in my retirement, I think I'm going to have a second house, or I think I'm going to I want my house paid for, and I think I'm going to stay at home and I'm going to garden, and I'm going to read. People have a vision of what they think their retirement is going to be the older they get. Maybe they're finally going to join a health club, or people have all different visions, right? So we say basically to ourselves when we're planning, where are we going to live? What are our medical needs going to be? What's our fund going to be? We're doing the same thing for your child, but we're thinking about it sooner. They're coming out of school and we're saying, what are we going to have to fund, and where's the money going to come from? So when I look at the 4 sources of the money, the big pot of money could come from government benefits. So we're going to address that. But it also could come from savings you do or other people do for your child. It could come from insurance that you have to fund your child at your death. It could come from other family members. It could come from your child's work, a lot of places, right? All right. So we start by building a cash flow for them, just like we did for you. And this is what's going to feed in to your child's plan and to your plan. So we say, what's going to come in when your child's all these different ages? What's it look like when they're babies? What's it look like when they're in school? We keep modifying this map when they're in transition program. We assume when they're an adult, they're going to start to need to look at residential programs. And then life without you is you're not around to do all the stuff you're doing anymore. You're gone, you're on another planet somewhere, and they're still here and they still need this funding, right? So as we start to look at all those stages that we did, just like in the cash flow for you, we build one of these that says, okay, how much SSI are they going to get? What is Medicaid going to pay for? What is grandma going to come to the table with? Can they work? All those things. And then we build in the expenses. So if we say, you know what, the money coming in is going to be $20,000, but the living expenses are going to be $45,000. We're short, right? We're going to be short money. And we can say, if we're short every year for our child, because the government's not paying for everything, that times 40 years after we're gone or 30 years after we're gone is what we have to save for our child. So part of it is going to be during our retirement, which we're going to feed into our retirement plan. And the other part is what we're going to quantify to say that's the money that we're going to have to put aside for our child. So this is another step that we go through to say, build a budget for your child and what's it going to look like. So the two players so far are mom and dad taking care of themselves and mom and dad helping think through the numbers for the child. Now we're going to bring the third party into our planning is the government. Now, sometimes most of us don't like to talk to the IRS. And we, in our office, we talk to the government agencies a lot. And parents don't like to talk to them because they, A, don't always answer the phone, B, they don't exactly make it clear what they're looking for. And sometimes you get letter after letter. But the programs aren't that complicated. So I'm just going to walk through this pie. Sometimes I take it in many, many slides. I'm going to do just a quick overview, and then I'm going to show you what happens into the future. So if somebody like me was working, I pay into the Social Security world, and I'm in the entitlement program. It's called entitlements. So I pay, they take FICA out of my check. And when they take that money out of my check, when I become disabled or when I retire, I'm going to get either Social Security, or if I'm disabled, I'm going to get Social Security disability. Okay. So I'm paying for that. I'm actually paying for it. And in order to get that disability check, I have to prove to the government that I have a substantial gainful limit to my income, which is $1030 a month. And if I can't make that, they're going to consider me disabled. I mean, it's not $1030, $1310, sorry, $1310 a month. Next year, it's going to be $1350. I'm always trying to keep up with what's happening because we're at the end of the year. So if I cannot make $1310 a month, they will consider me disabled. Now, not just because I can't get a job, but because of my disability, I can't make that much. So if I have paid into that FICA and I can go to the government and prove because of this medical condition, I cannot work, then they will give me my SSDI check. It's a disability check. And we saw that amount on that form that we had. And when I get that, 2 years after that I get that, I will go into the Medicare system. I don't even have to be 65 to get Medicare. I will go into that once I get SSDI. Okay, so that's what happens to those of us who work. So what happens to somebody like my son who has some significant disabilities? He has mental illness, he has OCD, he's blind, he has lots of issues, right? He'll never work at a full paying job. So he doesn't have an SSDI record. He doesn't have quarters for Social Security. So there's two rules for him. And these are called needs-based benefits. SSI, supplemental security income, is currently $794 a month. But we have to be able to prove A, that we have a disability and we cannot make $1310 a month, right? We also have to prove that we need help, and need help because I didn't pay into it. I'm not entitled to anything. I have to show that I don't have anything more than a house, a car, a prepaid funeral, $2,000, and an ABLE account. Now, if you heard me doing this years ago, it didn't include the ABLE account because that's new. So we're going to just mention that. Okay. House, car, prepaid funeral, $2,000 in ABLE. So if I can prove my child has a disability and I can prove they don't have more than those things, they get their check of $794. Okay. That's what we all know when our child turns 18, and we can't get it before 18 because before 18, unless we don't have jobs and we don't have assets, they will count mom and dad's assets and income. So we apply for this benefit on the month after our child's 18th birthday, and we get our SSI. And then once we get that, and that's a federal program, then after we get that, we can go to the Medicaid system and say, now I need Medicaid. We give them our proof of our SSI, we give them a birth certificate, and we get into this Medicaid system, and that is a state-run program. All right, what is Medicaid going to do for us? Medicaid pays healthcare. It pays for programs, all these workshops and programs, state programs. It pays for a job coach if the individual could go to work and needs a job coach. And it's the program that paid services and residential. It's the big check. SSI might be $794, but Medicaid and Medi-Cal in California is what can be paying. I have people getting anywhere from $2,000 a month to $100,000 a year for services to provide for them. Okay, depends on what state you're in and how generous that state can be to provide those funding. It's not money that we actually get, it's money for services. Okay, all right. So understanding how those benefits work, and they tie very in, the Medicaid pays very closely into the health insurance our child has. So I'm going to talk about that pretty soon. When your child gets Medicaid, a lot of parents say, well, I'm not going to get it yet. But Medicaid isn't just health insurance. Remember that. It's a ticket, okay? So when your child comes out of school and you want them into programs, you're going to need that Medicaid program, okay? In some states, they have waiting lists. In the waiting list, you're waiting for that other residential funding. When you get pulled for that from that waiting list, they're going to ask you where your Medicaid number is. And if you don't have it, you're not going to get into that system of the bigger dollars. Now, what happens with health insurance for our children? They can stay on our health insurance plan as a child until what age? 26. But if a parent has group health insurance, most of the health insurance plans, and it's driven by the state that your company is domiciled in, that state will determine what the rules are for the company. But most companies who have big group insurance plans allow a child with a disability to stay on your health insurance as long as you have it. As long as you're working and have health insurance, your child can be on it, even though they're over 26. Okay, remember those things, because I'm going to talk about what happens when you retire and lose your health insurance. So your child's on your health insurance for a long time until you decide, I'm done working. Right? So doctors like Medicare. Not all doctors take Medicaid, which is why we really always want to pay attention to how these benefits work. All right. So let's go through an example of how those benefits are working, because then you'll understand all the next pieces and how important it is for A, you to plan, and B, to understand this. I'm going to take a very simple case. This is Dad's Social Security record. He's going to 67 and he's going to get $2,600 a month. Two other numbers. We talked about two other numbers. I just pulled them out of his statement. It says the maximum the child can get is $1,800 a month, and the most they can pay on his record is $4,400 a month. Three numbers, okay? All right. So we apply when the child turns 18, we got them their SSI in that bottom left bucket. We got them their $794 and we got them their Medicaid, all right? When the parent retires, so dad goes and retires, we go back to that record here. At the age of 67, dad says, I'm gonna retire. And he takes his $2,600 a month. Now, let's say mom never worked. Mom has no Social Security record. Maybe she worked a little bit and she has a little record. Mom can get her own or half of dad's, whichever is bigger. So mom says, I'm retiring too, give me my money. And so she takes $1,300 a month, okay? So they're now paying $3,900 a month on this record. How much could they give to the child when dad retires? So when dad goes and applies for Social Security, the first thing they're going to say is, do you have a spouse? And did she have her own work record? The second thing they're going to say at the end of the application is, do you have a child, an adult child with a disability? And if you say yes, they're going to say, okay, well, you need to go apply for an update to your child's benefits. And you have to go to something called DAC, which is Disabled Adult Child Benefit. So let's see how that works. So remember we said the mom and dad were getting $3,900. So there was $500 left over from dad's record. So they're going to give dad out of the Social Security system that number. It's really called DAC. So you see in the entitlement up in the corner, DAC, it's part of Social Security, but it's called Disabled Adult Child Benefit on SSA rather. So they're going to give your child $500 a month, and they're going to lower their SSI to $294. So SSI is there to give your child the $794, but once they have other income like Social Security, they're going to lower it and keep them at $794, but they're getting 2 checks. So what's so good about that? What's so good about getting 2 checks instead of 1? Well, 2 years after they get that second check of DAC, they go into the Medicare system. Now, this is really important because now your child will have Medicare and Medicaid. So this is where it starts to play out. Let's say when dad retires, he's starting to get these benefits. What else happened when dad retired? He took his Social Security, he lost his health insurance. He loses his health insurance. Child can't be on it if dad's retired. So the child's now on Medicaid. And if you wait until this process occurs just like this one did, what happened is dad retired, took his check, mom took her check, they both went on Medicare, and dad and the child is only on Medicaid. What if the child, and they lost their health insurance, they all lost their health insurance, but mom and dad have Medicare available. The child doesn't get Medicare until 2 years after. So from the time the parents retire for 2 whole years, the child's on Medicaid only. Parents aren't too happy about that. So sometimes we look at parents' records and say, who has a smaller record? So if mom had a really small Social Security record, I would have said to mom, don't wait till you're 67. Apply for your Social Security at 65. Forget half of dad's right now. Get your own. Even if it's $50 a month, apply for your Social Security. Because if mom gets in her Social Security record at 65, the son will get half of hers. It's a small amount, but by getting that half, the child gets to go into Medicare 2 years later. The minute one of the parents gets Social Security, the child can get into the DAC program and then 2 years later get Medicare. So I always want to find the parent who earns the most, who's probably going to wait and take their Social Security later, and have the lower income person apply for their Social Security, get the child into Medicare 2 years before. So when dad retires and takes this bigger check and they lose their health insurance, whoever has the health insurance, they lose it all. Then I get the child into Medicare system sooner. And then they have Medicare and Medicaid, sometimes the parent. So it's really important to do this detailed planning. Okay, this is part of the really important planning that you do. Now, if your child's working and they're getting their own work record, I don't care so much about what the parents are doing. But I care a lot if the child's not going to make enough to get into this system. Okay. All right. One last thing that happens. Parents pass away. So if both parents pass away, what happens to all of this? Well, this is what happens. Remember the maximum DAC we could get was $1,800. The child goes into the DAC program totally. They're getting $1,800. That's more than $794. Their SSI goes away, but they still have Medicare and Medicaid. So understanding these benefits and how they fit into your planning it's not just about the child. It's about when mom and dad take their Social Security. So if you parents are working with someone who's helping you think about how to take your Social Security and you plug your numbers into a system, it will always tell you higher earner, wait till you're 70, and the other spouse wait till they're 67 and take half. And it gives you these numbers to get the most amount of Social Security. We as parents have to think different. Maybe we don't want every single dollar out of Social Security right away. The bigger number is going to be healthcare for our child. Okay. So mom and dad put their numbers together and got a sense of themselves. We put some numbers together for our child. We understand how the benefits work so we can determine, now we go back to mom and dad. So we'll keep impacting mom and dad's future, right? Not just the child's. We want the child to be safe, but now we got to take different way that mom and dad are taking their Social Security. We got to go back to mom and dad's planning and make sure that we took care of that process to make sure that the child will get into the Medicare system at the right time. All right. So what are we going to need? Because now we're going to put the full plan together and we're going to go see an attorney. So first, we're going to need on the bottom, we're going to say we need the assets and liabilities of mom and dad. We need to have identified the needs of the child when we did that next step. Okay, we're going to take all those things, the attorney is going to look at them and say, what do you have and what's your child going to need? And if you go to the attorney without this, I don't know how you answer their questions, right? So now we're going to talk a little bit about the trust that you can use. And this is, so when I started working with my parents, I knew nothing about this back 30 years ago. So I don't know why we do. I was in the financial business and I didn't know it, right? And I would tell you most financial people who are financial advisors don't have this training. I think there's about a paragraph in our CFP curriculum on this stuff. So why would the parents know it? So when I talked to my parents, when I first started my business, I said to my parents, so have you prepared for Marcia? Something happens to you, what's going on for Marcia? And Dad said, we don't want to talk about it. A typical answer, we don't want to talk about it. We're going to keep our heads in the sand. It's too painful to think about. So about a couple of months later, I said, have you thought about it? We don't want to think about it. So one day my dad finally came to me and said, fine, you wore us down. We'll tell you what we did. He says, we have a will, and the will says we're splitting our assets 6 ways, but we're going to leave 2/6 to you, and everybody else gets their 6th, but Marcia, you're going to get Marcia's. I didn't get it. I said, why are you disinheriting her? I didn't get this yet because I just started my business and I didn't know the details. So when I went back and said, why are you doing that? I then found out, well, Marcia can't have more than what? A house, a car, a prepaid funeral, $2,000. That was those days, that's all she could have. So if they left her money, she would have lost those benefits. She would have lost her medical care. She would have lost her disability check. So along in 1990 came this ability to do this. This trust came along. So I said to my parents, there must be a better way than disinheriting her. Now, what was wrong with me holding her money? What was wrong with that? Nothing, right? Well, there is something wrong with it. I loved her and I was a financial person. That's why my parents put me in charge. But why was it wrong? Well, it's my money, right? If I'm holding her money, it's mine. And so I could do whatever I want with it. If I was one of the siblings who really wasn't very frugal, I might borrow it, right? I might use it for vacation. I might put it back, but never get it back. What if I die and that money that I'm holding for my sister goes to my children? Okay. What if I get divorced and thinking I was holding it, but I thought I would put it in joint tenancy with my husband. And then he comes home one day and says, honey, I got a new babe. That money that was my sister's might get split. Okay. All these things. What if I get sued? The money I'm holding for my sister is at risk. So even though it felt like the right thing to do for my parents, and maybe they were given that advice by an attorney who didn't have the expertise yet, that's not the right answer. It might be the lowest cost answer, but it's not the right answer. So along in 1990, and then came the trust on the left, and then a few years later, the trust on the right came about. The trust on the left is called a third-party trust. It means the money that's going into this special needs trust is money that was put there by other people. Your child's money can never go in that account. So we can leave an inheritance. The attorney sets up this trust. You can't just go to a bank and say, give me this trust. You can't go to the trust company and say, okay, open me a trust. The attorney has to have drawn up a document called a special needs trust. It's called lots of things. The name isn't as important as that it's a third-party special needs trust, right? And I can create it at my death. I don't like that way, but we would create, it would be there when I die. The money would go into it, or we could open an account and start saving during our lifetime. The money in it is to be used for over and above what the government pays for. The child never controls it. A trustee controls it. So there's money in this trust that I'm leaving. That 1/6 share that my parents gave to me instead would have gone to this trust. Okay. It's for the supplemental care of my sister or my son. And then when my sister or my son would pass away, I'm saying in this document who gets it. So I'm creating a trust for my son. A share of my inheritance will go to that. It'll be for his use all of his lifetime. I'll name my sister and his brothers to be the trustees. And then when they pass away, when my son passes away, part of it will go to a charity. Part of it might go to my grandchildren. If I can say whoever gets it. right? I always encourage people, if you have organizations that have helped your child, don't forget them on the remainder beneficiaries of these trusts, because you're counting on them, right? So we want to keep them strong. All right. So that's a third party trust. There's another kind of special needs trust called a first party trust. This one is called a payback trust. First party means the money that goes into this one was my child's money. Well, if my child's not supposed to have more than a house, a car, a prepaid funeral, and $2,000, where would this money come from? It comes from medical settlements. It comes from grandma left my child money because they didn't listen. So let's say grandma leaves my child $100,000, thinking my son needs it. $100,000 is going to cut him off from his benefits, right? So we go to open one of these trusts. Sometimes they have to be approved by the court, but it's the child's money that goes into this trust. It's spent for his care, just like the other one. But when my son would pass away, the state gets reimbursed if Medicaid paid dollars for him. So if from the date of his birth forward, there's a tracking mechanism for how much Medicaid is spent for him. And when he passes away, if there's money left in that trust, the state gets a reimburse. They call that a clawback on the money. Okay. So person with disabilities money goes in that trust. The other thing that can go in it is child support. In the world of divorce, sometimes a parent pays child support, and they can be ordered to pay child support for the lifetime of the child. But if the child support is paid past the age of 18, it's considered the child's money. So we want that child support money also to be paid into one of these trusts. Okay, so they're very effective trusts, and they're very they work because the money is not your child's. It's for their benefit. It's very important that you use an attorney, and I'm going to put some names of attorneys on this document that we're going to send out with this recording, so that you'll have it on the site with the names of the attorneys and the trust company. So you'll have the resources that you need. Okay. All right. So this trust also, the first party trust, it goes to heirs, but it only goes after the state is reimbursed. So that's not our trust of choice, right? If we get the third party trust set up, we want to tell grandma, we want to tell everybody. But sometimes our child gets money. I had a child who won lotto, right? And they won the lotto, and now they're going to lose their benefits. We had to create a first party trust, go to court, get approval to money, put the money in the trust, right? Okay. The difference also is the trust on the left, there's no reporting to the court. The trustees are fiduciaries, they're responsible, but the trust on the right, many times we have to go to court once a year and show how the money is being used. A couple things to know. Don't leave money to the person with a disability. Don't give it to the siblings. And we can't use the trust like we might use for other children. Sometimes I set up a trust for my other two boys that they'll get an inheritance, but someone's going to be held back for years. We can't use that. We have to use the special needs trust. So a couple of things to know. Remember, who can set up the special needs trust? Anybody can set up a special needs trust for my son, except him. Okay, who's in charge of it? I'm in charge of it as long as I'm alive. But I say inside the document, if something happens to me, who are the money people going to be for my son? Who's going to be in charge of it? I say that. I identify them. Now, we don't like these trusts inside of a will or inside of a trust. What does that mean? So if an attorney creates a will for you and the will says, when I die, create the special needs trust, it will become a trust on the date I die. If my will says create the trust when I die, that's when it exists. Okay. Well, I want a sure thing. Okay. I want to make sure that when I pass away, that trust is there and money is in it. So how do we want this trust set up? Attorneys will set this trust as a standalone trust all by itself. They won't make it inside of another document. They will make it a standalone trust, one, so that it follows the rules of today. The rules of today are good. I don't know what they're going to do for the future. We see some crazy stuff in our government going on all the time, right? We don't know what they're going to do. Sometimes they do stuff in the middle of the night and we wake up and it's different, right? So I want to make sure it follows the rules of today because it's good. I want it signed today. Secondly, I want something that people can leave something to. What do I mean by that? Piggybacking. So if I create a special needs trust and my parents would want to leave something to my son, I want them to be able to leave it to a trust, special needs trust, and I don't want them to have to create one. So if I create the special needs trust and sign it, it now is a legal entity. And I can tell my parents, if you want to leave something to Mark, you can leave it to the trust I created. Now, if that trust is on my will, it doesn't exist yet. right? So if my parents died before me, there's no trust yet because I haven't died yet. So attorneys create these as standalone documents so other family members can piggyback on them, okay? If you're looking for attorneys, I'm going to leave some attorneys in your areas so that you'll have access. And some of them have done some of these workshops with us. So I tried to get one tonight, but they were unavailable. But having attorneys have special expertise in this area. You can't just use a real estate attorney. You can't just use sometimes a regular estate planning attorney. They will know estate planning, but they may not know this. So it's really important to get the ones that know it. The other things you want to talk to an attorney about is what happens if when your child turns 18. Okay, there's other things you need to do. So when your child's 18, they are a legal adult. They make all their own decisions. So the questions are, can your child do that? Right? So it's another thing that we're planning for the future. We have to think about what should we do when their child turns 18 and who's going to be in charge? Can your child make their decisions? And we talked about this in the class a lot last time, right? Or should they be able to sign a power of attorney form to give us some rights, right? So there's some new things coming in February where the child will actually be able to, if there's levels of this. So one, you do nothing. Two, you let them sign a power of attorney. Maybe they're going to instead just have a contract with someone to give them some authority to work with them, right? It's a contract to work together. It's something new coming out. And if you haven't seen that, I think that that session about power of attorney and guardianship are on the site for the ARC. And then let's say your child doesn't really have capacity because to be signing a contract if they sign a power of attorney. So what if they can't do that? So then what if with somebody like my sister, my son, I'm not his guardian, okay? My son is pretty high functioning from a mental capacity. So he has issues and he needs somebody to make decisions with him and he assigned a power of attorney to me. But my sister, she couldn't do that. So my parents went to court and became her guardian. And the courts are giving us responsibility of this person. It could be for their whole person. It could be for just their money. It could be just for their person. But we're going to court and proving that the person needs a guardian. So that's something we have to do in the future. And if I was somebody's guardian, I need to think about the future because if something happens to me, who's going to step into my shoes? It's a big job. So we, for future planning, have to think about two people as parents. Who's going to be the caregiver and not necessarily the one providing the care, but managing the care. So I call them the care people. And who are going to be the money people? Those are the ones who are going to manage the money for my child, two people. They could be the same person. Sometimes we like two people to be the money people. I'll tell you the other thing I've learned in the last couple of years is how important these jobs are. And when I started working with some clients who are 40, 45, they're now 70 and 80. And they're saying, wow, that trustee job is a big job. It's making sure they're not making a mistake of how they're writing the checks out so the person doesn't lose benefits. It's making sure that they're paying the bills directly. It's making sure that they do the tax returns. It's making sure of all the things you have to do as a trustee, there's a big responsibility. And they're realizing that they've given these jobs to the siblings and the siblings, don't want to, may want to, but don't have time. I did a session with some siblings at a group in Illinois with the siblings there. And I had siblings who were currently guardians or trustees, some who were going to be trustees, and some who weren't even sure if they were being named trustees. It was a really interesting group. And I asked the persons who were the trustees, now, how big of a job it was. And they said, we have no idea half the time what we're doing. We're asking questions. We wish that somebody had sent us to trustee school. We don't know what we're doing. The ones who are going to be trustees said, I really want to know. But the parents of the people now who are alive and are starting to pass those jobs on are starting to say, I realize this is a big job and maybe we should bring in a corporate trustee and let the family members be the guardians and the communicators to the trustee, but let the trustee do the work, corporate trustee do the work. It's giving them some confidence. So the older we get, sometimes the more we realize we don't want to burden our other children with some of those responsibilities that somebody else could do, and let them have the job of the care person and let the professional do that. So we're seeing more and more of that. Okay. Now, the hard decisions are trustees all the things we have to, caregivers, making sure that the care people are having to take care of medical decisions and make sure the government benefits are in place, and talking to the employer and helping them if they're not placed in housing yet, finding residential programs. It's a big role, right? So I was doing one of these sessions during the pandemic. It was about 6 months in, and I was doing a session. I was going to be talking about money stuff. And I said, you know what? I had more calls from people today that had to make a decision of take their child out of the group home or leave them there. And if they take them out, they couldn't bring them back for a long time. And if they left them there, they weren't going to be able to see them. And I said, and these parents were just struggling through that, right? And I said, you know what? Now we understand how important these jobs are. Because if somebody else was in your shoes having to make those decisions, they're not light decisions, right? So all of these responsibilities are pretty big ones, okay? And again, we talked about when your child's 18, we have those jobs, okay? The other thing that's new is the ABLE Act. So if you didn't see the ABLE Act class that we did, I think you have a recording on the ARC website. We did it with JJ Hanley, who runs the Illinois ABLE. Just know that there's a lot of rules around it, but it's a program that allows us to put money away for our child. It's tax-free savings, so they can have a house, a car, a prepaid funeral, $2,000 in an ABLE account. The ABLE account lets us put $15,000 a year away into the account. If the child's working, they can put a little over $12,000 into the account. It grows tax-free. It's for disability-related expenses. Now, people are always asking, how broad is that? It gets broader every time I talk to JJ. She said, what you should think about as parents is how you can spend that money. It is for anything that enhances the life of the child, okay? So if the child needs to go on a vacation and they need a caregiver to go with them, it could pay for both. It can't pay for the caregiver's whole family, okay, reasonableness test, but it pays for things that that child needs. So you can put $15,000 a year away into that account. It goes in, it's their state-run programs, okay? And the money comes out and you keep receipts and you do that. There's two things to know about it. One, if the account goes over 100,000, the SSI can be suspended. So if your child's getting SSI, you gotta kind of watch that account, not let it go over the 100, okay? And then if your child's out of the SSI system and they go into DAC, we don't care about that 100,000 limitation anymore. How much can be in it is depends upon the states. They have the same limit as the state's 529. So many states are 400,000 to 500,000 in their 529 account. You can put that much into an ABLE, okay? The other downside of the ABLE is the ABLE has a payback at death of the child. And the payback is from the date the account was set up. Now that is changing all the time as we speak. From the federal side, they are allowing some beneficiaries to be put on. So we'll pay attention to those rules. They aren't all passed yet, but I think they're going to get more and more lenient on that payback to the state and let some money be paid perhaps to other disabled people in the family. All right, so ABLE's important. Okay, we're running out of time. You have to do all these things for the future, right? So mom and dad, you need to plan. Pull your stuff together. You have to do the plan for the child. So do your own first. Do the plan for the child second. Understand the benefits your child has. Pull those statements. If you don't know, have somebody help you explain it. No, think about when you might, if you're doing your retirement plan, when are you going to take your Social Security to make sure that your child gets into the Medicare system? Know the health insurance they're on, okay? So know how the benefit fits into things. And then you need a legal attorney. So make sure that you've got the special needs trust set up. And then 5, make sure you have an ABLE account set up. Pull it all together. Now we did all that. We're perfect. We were perfect. We got it all done. And then we pass away and people have other jobs. And what do? We got to tell them about it. We got to tell them they have jobs. So if I'm going to give somebody a job, don't not give them the tools. Give them the history. Where is this child living? What do they need to know about how it's funded? What kind of a place you want them to live if they're not living residentially yet? If they're young when you pass away, what's the school system they're in? Or if they're coming out of transition and you're thinking about a special needs college, what is in your brain that needs to be passed along? You need to communicate that. What if they're working? What do they have to know about work, right? What do they have to know about the accommodations made for them? What kind of a job could they have? What can they do? Medical care. Just, we have to tell these people who are going to step into our shoes, not just the medical doctors they have today, not just the medicine they're taking today, but they've always had, because the next person coming in, the doctor might prescribe a medicine, a new doctor might prescribe a medicine that already didn't work. The new guardians are not going to know all this stuff. You as parents need to document that. If our child's not social, I mean, or not verbal, and they can communicate about their social life, document it. Who are their friends? What are the programs they're in? Document all that, because a new person stepping in, you may think they know this, but I will guarantee you, when my sister passed away, I had time to talk to my parents, and they told me so many things about my sister. And I was the chairman of the board of the place she lived at. I was connected to her life. I was involved, and still they told me stuff I didn't know. So if I didn't know it, the siblings won't know it. Okay, it's really important step. This is important as the legal stuff. Right? The legal stuff, you get done. This is a continual thing. The routines, we build routines around our child to keep them safe. We build the little stuff. We need to document that. Write it down. I don't care how you write it down, but you do need to write it down. We have a whole system on our website that you can use where you document things, you put pictures on. I've asked the staff to start putting it in so you can put a video in. You might want to talk to the future guardians on it. So we'll let you, do a recording on it. And then tell people where that information is. It's really important. It's also important for the trust company, right? If the trust company is going to step in and be working with the guardian, everybody needs this information, right? All the little nuances. I was doing one with some parents and the siblings were there. And I said, parents, what have you not told the siblings? And a mother said, my son has to get clothes at a certain place. It's the only kind of clothes he'll wear. It's got Velcro stuff on it. It's the only place I could find that fits him. And I said to the brother who was going to be a sibling, I said, you know that? He goes, I never heard about it, right? It's the little stuff. We need to share it. All right. So what I'm asking you to do is think about all those things we talked about. What in your world needs to be updated? Do you need to look at your trust? Do you need to open enable? What is it that you can do? Pick one of all the things we talked about. Put a cash flow for yourself together. Maybe do one for your child, look at their benefits. Pick the one thing I talked about tonight that you haven't done yet. Just pick one, okay? Because if you try to do all 6 that we talked about, nothing will get done. If I go to a program and I learn 6 things and I go home and I don't concentrate on one of them, nothing gets done. I want you to focus right now and take a piece of paper out and write on that card, piece of paper, whatever it is. I call them guilt cards because if I write something down for myself on a piece of paper and I look at it the next day, I'm going, I got to do that. I'll put it on the refrigerator. What is the one thing that you promised me you'll do? I don't care what it is of these things. Pick one. Because if I know if you do one, you'll get motivated and you'll do 2. Right? Okay. So I'm going to stop. See if anybody has any questions for me, for Richard, for anybody else who's on. If they have questions, Mary, you can put them in the chat box. Do you have any for us?
We do. We've got a couple. The first one, how do I let the family know I've created a trust without them feeling that I'm expecting them to leave money to my child?
Good question. I have a letter I'd be glad to include with this stuff when we send it in. It's a little letter that says we as a family have created a trust. We're not asking anybody to leave money, but we know that sometimes inadvertently money could get to our child and it would mess things up. Kind of a letter that says that. And it's not asking for money, it's just describing how it works. Now, sometimes I say, and parents say, well, we're not going to do anything. I would always teach you, then go back. When the parents say, we're not leaving anything to your child, we're leaving it to you. I would ask the parents if they have the words per stirpes in their will. And per stirpes means they're leaving it to me, their daughter, but if I'm not alive, it goes to my children. Oops, right? So give your parents this letter or family members and just say, we're doing planning. If you don't think they're thinking about it, they are. That they want to make sure you've done your planning. So say we've done some planning. Here's if there's anything that might get to our child or you want to ever give them a gift, here's how you do it. It's pretty, no, we're not asking for money kind of letter. So I will include a copy of that with this video.
Another question we have, currently my husband decided to take Social Security at age 62, and our daughter, who's now 17, is getting Social Security benefits from him. I'm the higher earner, and right now I'm thinking about waiting to take my benefits until I'm 67. At that point, do my daughter's Social Security benefits start to come from my record? Is there something I need to say to Social Security?
Well, let me tell you about that. So if your daughter's 17, she's getting the benefit because she's a minor. So the first thing that's going to happen when she turns 18 is that benefit is going to have to stop. And you're going to have to go back and prove the disability at the age of 18. Okay. So if your husband, you said, Mary, did you say it was a lower earner?
The husband's a lower earner, which is, he's taking it at 62.
52. So is that's going to get your child into the Medicare system at the age of 20, because they're going to be 18 into this program and then 20, unless they're already in Medicare. Depends how long they've had it, but probably not. And then what'll happen is you have to look at it and say, if yours is a lot higher and you might wait, it depends on your financial situation. Your child's already in that system. Once they turn 18, we're going to be able to flip your child from they're in this child's benefit, but they're going to have to prove disability at the age of 18. At that point, you'll determine they'll get the same amount, but you'll have to determine if yours is much higher. Do you want, what's the half of yours? And should you wait? Because maybe for your whole picture, it'd be better for you to wait till you're 70. So it's hard to answer that without knowing your whole financial picture.
Okay.
Okay.
Another question. SSI monthly payment amounts continue to increase, but the $2,000 threshold is not. Is there any talk of this threshold increasing?
It's been that for a really long time. I saw some legislation, but I haven't heard anything about it since that they were talking about raising it. But every once in a while it raises its ugly head. I think now that we have the ABLE account, that kind of helps a lot, right? So we can use the ABLE account that if your child it gets close to having more than 2,000, they can move it to the ABLE. So that at least allows them to have more money. I have seen legislation that they were thinking about raising it to 10,000, but I have not seen anything on that since then.
Okay.
So every once in a while it comes across and then it goes away.
Well, thank you, Marianne. Unfortunately, our time has run out, so we'll have to answer any other questions individually. We'd like to thank Marianne for being here and sharing her knowledge with us. We'd also like to thank Richard Emery from American Bank and Trust for sponsoring this evening's session, and let you know that this session has been recorded for future reference and will be posted on the ARC of Quad Cities website. We'll be sending you a link as soon as the video has been uploaded. Thank you again for your participation. As always, if you have any questions or would like more information, please feel free to contact us at any time. We hope you have a wonderful evening.
Good night, everyone. Have a great night. Night.